Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of Correspondent Week. My name's James. You know that, but you might not know the name of our new guest. Let me introduce you to our new Crystal Palace correspondent, Ruaidhri McLaughlin-Dowd. How are you, Rory?
I'm good, James. How are you?
Yes, very well, mate. The listeners won't know. You know, some of the patrons will do, perhaps, but introduce yourself for the listeners and the viewers and tell us a bit about your relationship with Palace.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rory. I started supporting Palace when I was about 3. So my dad would have taken me, probably would have had a Palace kit before I could walk and stuff like that. But my first game, funnily enough, that I went to was Sheffield United, which is the first game this season. So that's an interesting bit of symmetry, I guess, to some extent. And the first game was one of those ones where it's sort of kids for a quid or whatever. So I came along to that, and there was a parachutist who landed on the halfway line and broke his ankle.
Oh,
So I've
yes, you
been
do.
hooked. Yeah, been hooked ever since. That's obviously I don't remember the football, but I remember the trauma from from that. It was a good introduction to supporting Palace, really, I guess. But then obviously Palace have got quite a tight knit community in terms of the fans because of all the recent history. I mean, some people probably see us as a fairly stable Premier League club now, but we had administration about 2000, I think, when we had Attilio Lombardo and the bald eagle, and we had one administration there where the club looked like it could go to the wall, and then again in 2010 we had a similar situation after Simon Jordan's ownership of the club. We looked like we could go out of business then as well. So yeah, I've been season ticket holder at Palace for about 10 years, and then just before the pandemic I moved to Ireland, and obviously didn't have a season ticket because it wouldn't be worth it coming back from Dublin, and pandemic happened, so I haven't had a season ticket since then. But yeah, I had a unique situation during the pandemic as well, where I was doing the COVID testing. So I was sort of running the site at Crystal Palace. Did a couple of clubs, did like Brentford and Arsenal and Tottenham and stuff as well. But I was at Palace at the time, so I met a lot of the players and things like that, which was quite cool on a daily basis. So yeah, that's and got to go to games as well was the other thing when it was behind closed
Oh, when
doors.
no one else could. Oh, blinded.
Yeah, I was stood in the sort of corner where the players come out, so like in the players' tunnel, and I
Yeah.
got to watch quite a few of the games from there. I remember the Arsenal 3-0, I think was our last game that we got to see. But I got to see Roy's first goodbye when he originally left the club as well. So
It was nice. I got to ask that, haven't I? Of the players. It was like, hello, mate. Who would give you their time?
Ebbs was like is the nicest human being on the planet.
Ebe Eze, yeah?
Yeah, Eze's lovely. I always like Chet Kouyaté as well, who's gone to Forest now, but he was a lovely person as well. He was, now his English wasn't 100%, but he was like always happy to just hang around and have a chat. A few others, I think Connor Wickham was quite nice as well, but he wasn't there for very long while I was there. But yeah, Ebbs, and then the normal people like you've seen Michael Olise being interviewed after a goal, just being like, "How did you score the goal?" I had a shot and it went in, and that's pretty much what he's like in his normal life. Guaita's lovely as well, actually, the goalkeeper. He gets the training. He like going to matches. He gets the training and shows up like 10 minutes before kickoff. Essentially, it's just so laid back.
As you do. That's different. Do they not all have to travel together, even under that circumstance? Surely during COVID, they had to travel together, no? Or...
Nah, not for home matches. Not at Palace anyway. I don't know.
That's interesting. That's unique these days. You used to get them stories of players driving in, and I remember an old story of Jason Dazelle rocking up at White Hart Lane, like, and the game was like about 40 minutes old. They'd had to name him as a substitute back in the day. You just wouldn't get that sort of thing now, I don't think. It's brave, relying on trains to work properly in this country.
Yeah, yeah, most of them do drive in, but it's always the same ones who are late. Like Tyreek Mitchell's always late because he is again so laid back. Like he's horizontal, so he's just too chill.
Proper ITK, mate. Love it. Let's discuss the back end of last season. Firstly, what was your reaction when Patrick Vieira left?
To be honest, I was a little bit disappointed because I think he should have been given more time because the fixtures were so tough, and it was just one of those things. It was a quirk of the fixture list. With 10 games to go, we're in a relegation battle, but I never really felt worried until they sacked Vieira, and then I was like, oh, maybe we are up against it here. So that was tough. I think Vieira as a manager, he obviously came through the City Football Group, so he learn a style of play which they're trying to build their kind of like based on positional play, based on Guardiola ideology. And I think when you've got the parts to play that way, he knows what to do, but he is not a very experienced manager. So he's not very adept at working out what problems are on the fly, or going, I need to find a new system because I'm playing Jeffrey Schlupp, who's sort of a left wing back in central midfield. You know, when Gallagher went, everyone thought, oh, Gallagher's gone, Palace's team's much worse now. But Gallagher was the Eze replacement, right? But if you put Eze in your team, you're not going to get
because
the
Eze
same.
was injured, right?
Yeah, he snapped his Achilles. And then you're not going to get the same pressing from Eze. So you need to change the way you're playing.
Is that why he kept leaving him out then? Because
yeah, I think so.
that was the one thing. I think the big thing was when Vieira got sacked, most of us were neutrals when, oh, that's harsh with the run of fixtures you'd had. And it wasn't like you were getting battered in them. You had some decent draws in that period, like Manchester United, Newcastle. It's like we're losing all these games.
Yeah.
In fact, if you'd spread the fixtures across the season, sure, you may have expected a little bit more, but you'd have all gone standard, standard, standard. The run you had at the end, we all thought you'll be absolutely fine, was the general take. But the one thing I think really changed it for a lot of us in our thinking was Eze's performances at the end of last season. Why was he not playing?
Yeah,
there's almost no explanation to that.
Because if Eze's a 10, right? And in that style of play, the 4-3-3, they play 2-8s, don't they? So like that sort of emulating Guardiola football. You play 2-8s. You can't really play as an 8.
I think he can, mate.
He's not defensively. He's a free spirit, isn't he?
Yeah.
So when you're a Palace, you could play as an 8 for City or Arsenal or Tottenham, or where you have 60-70% of possession. When you've got 30% of possession, he's been asked to do a lot of things he shouldn't do. But the other side of that, what you've just said there in terms of losing all those games, if you look at those games in a row, you don't expect to win any of them individually. But when you look at a collective of, say, 12 games against the greedy 6, you expect to win 1 or 2. So not winning any. I mean, we won 4 the previous season. So you've got to win 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, that. A little shot of confidence. There was that run of 3 games, didn't even have a shot on target. So I can understand more why the change was made. But then I think a lot of us, again, neutrals, looking at Hodgson coming in, were like, why have you gone backwards here when you was happy to let him retire, essentially, 18 months earlier? Why go back? And to be fair to Roy, he did great. You were good to watch at the end of last season. Are you now happy that he's got the job permanently again?
Yes, that's a difficult thing. I was thinking, like, no Palace fan is ever going to be disappointed to look at the dugout and see Hodgson there, because he's from Croydon. He was at Palace as a youth team player, but he never really made it. I think he went non-league, then obviously went off to Sweden. So it was like a big coming home thing when he came to Palace first time around. But I guess it's the issue is more, you look around. I always think of Palace. When we got promoted, we sort of got promoted by accident to some degree, right? We weren't one of the favourites to go up that season. And then we were relying on tried and tested methods from other clubs, I think. So we were buying a lot of players on the basis of having Premier League experience. So Benteke, Sakho, Cahill, those type of players, which works to some extent playing a certain style of football. But we also went through the cycle of managers, Allardyce and Pulis and Warnock and Pardew, and Roy gets tarred with that brush, unfortunately, I think a little bit, because he's not one of those types of managers. I don't think he's not one of those, play for a point kind of managers. I think he's a little bit more adept tactically, although Liverpool fans probably wouldn't agree. But we were approaching things in a kind of old-fashioned way, I think, like a 2000s kind of way, the way Stoke or Sunderland went about it, where you buy a big name. To get to the next level, you spend more money and you put them on a big contract, and it doesn't always work out. I think when Roy left, the summer we had in recruitment, there was a sort of consideration that maybe we're becoming a more modern club. So you look at Brighton, Brentford, even Burnley, and to some degree Southampton with their recruitment and the way they were going about it. And I think the main worry with Roy coming back was sort of, well, maybe they've given up on that project of trying to become a modern club. So that was a worry with it. But, based on recent recruitment, I don't think that's necessarily the case. Hopefully, last couple of days.
No, there's a player we'll talk about in a sec. You've been heavily linked with, as per all these Correspondent Week podcasts. We are recording around about roughly 24 hours in advance of release. But yeah, it looks like you may finally be getting an incoming. I think my concern as a neutral would be, and you're safe with Roy. You know what you're getting. You're safe per round. You're not going to be in trouble. You're not going to go down.
I don't think we'd be in trouble either way, though. With as long as
no,
Olise
that's very
stays.
fair. But what I mean is, say suddenly Wilf's gone, Olise's injured. If Eze got injured as well, suddenly you look at it and go,
yeah,
oh,
Jordan,
actually, Roy's experience will massively help you in that sort of circumstance. But it does also feel like maybe Crystal Palace are on pause this year, and I'm not sure I know the reason why exactly. Maybe it's target for another manager next year. Maybe there's a little bit of restriction off a backlog of some of those signings like Benteke over the years, where perhaps from an FFP perspective, you can't go mad, but also don't want to be selling the likes of Gay or Anderson or Eze, having just lost Wilfried Zaha. It feels like you're on pause for whatever reason. Is that a fair assessment?
It is to some extent, but you've got to remember the history of the club. For the last 6 seasons, we've only really had 2 or 3 windows where we've spent money at all. So we've got some owners there, Harris and Blitzer, who are incredibly wealthy and keep buying more and more clubs to add to their portfolio, but they don't really seem to put money into Palace. They bid for Chelsea, and they're still possibly trying to bid for Man United. I don't know. I guess that's probably old because I think that's down to the last 2, but they're involved with bidding for Man United. So, but they don't necessarily do the same for Palace. I don't think there'll be any FFP restrictions because most of that recruitment, well, yeah, there will be to some extent for the recruitment that we did with Anderson, Gehi, Olise, Eze that year. I don't think for the Benteke stuff there would be because that's sort of
too far gone.
Yeah, I think we would have signed him 7 seasons ago.
Yeah,
now.
Do you know what? You're not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'd have been 30 million quid, but then he renewed his contract a couple of times as well. So he had a 5-year contract, then he's renewed it.
We started scoring when his contract was running out, wasn't it?
Well, he scored in his first season, but we had Aladici, didn't we? So we're putting the ball on his head.
Aladici.
Yeah, but I don't think there will necessarily be too many restrictions. I think it's more a question of being an intelligent, modern mid-table Premier League club does rely on selling those players. So we, like Gehi's been linked with the move, Olise, Anderson, Doucouré even to Liverpool, which, don't want that to happen. But I think it's probably more to do with the money coming into the club. When we spent that money, it was because John Textor bought a percentage of the club. I think he's the major shareholder now. He's got about 40%.
Yeah.
But they didn't announce that was the case during the transfer window. They announced it afterwards. So no one knew that we actually had that money to spend when we were spending it. So we got players cheaper than if they knew we had money. But I think he's just done an interview in The Athletic where he said it was a big mistake getting involved in Crystal Palace, which is, a bit rough when your owner says that.
Not healthy, mate. And I realise Palace have been through much worse than this, but that's not healthy to hear. No.
And also the other owners really, when we're talking about that spending with the Benteke and stuff like that, I think it was more under Allardyce. We spent a good amount of money because it looked like we might go down. And then that hamstrung us for a while. I don't think we're in that kind of position now, but Textor seems to want the club to be part of a multi-club model. The other owners own clubs, but it's more as a portfolio.
Minorities, yeah.
Yeah, it's like having a portfolio of assets rather than a sporting strategy, So, but Textor has said if he sold his stake, he would buy another Premier League club or buy a stake.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the point in that?
Because he says he doesn't have enough control over what he wants to have control over at Palace, which is recruitment and the academy, which then he's also praising Steve Parish in those interviews where he's like saying he's doing a really good job of running the club with cash flow positive, etc. And he praises Dougie Freedman as well and his recruitment. But then he's saying he doesn't have enough control over his investment. But he owns 40% of the club, and if they have a meeting about anything, it's 3 against 1, basically with Parish, Blitzer, and Harris against him. but he says he needs to own an English club because he owns Botafogo and Lyon, and any player from those teams wants to end up in England. So he needs an English club. So his multi-club model works. I don't know.
So could there be a change of ownership in the next couple of years then? It sounds like it will be from what you're saying now.
So there was a note in that interview that said that he owns 40% now, but there will be a capital raise, which then diminishes his stake. So basically the club will print more shares. And then I guess the other owners will buy those shares. But I think that's related to building the new stand, which is 100 million quid, I think. And
so this wouldn't affect that, no?
How do you mean it wouldn't affect building the stand?
No, in terms of the redevelopment of Selhurst Park.
I don't think so, because I think that money comes from Harrison Blitzer, and it's already something that they basically agreed to. I think it's written legally into a contract that they have agreed to provide the money for that. So basically they would print more shares. Those guys would buy those shares, and then that cash will be used to build the stand, which doesn't count against FFP, I don't think, because it's infrastructure investment.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think that would be affected by Textor, but if Textor wants to sell, I think Textor would put money into the club, but he's saying stuff like, you're better off buying someone from Brazil, which maybe we'll get onto, for 3 million quid, rather than buying someone from an English club for 30 million quid, because they're just as good, which to some degree, like, there is something in that. I think the Premier League rules have changed recently in terms of who you can recruit and who you can bring in. Overseas players, I think it's easier from South America now.
There's been a big influx of South American players to our league in the last couple of years. It's definitely on the increase.
Yeah, and so he obviously wants to use his multi-club model to get players in to Botafogo and then sell them on to Lyon and Palace, I guess. But from our perspective, because he doesn't own all of the club, it's not necessarily our interests aren't all aligned, or our recruitment interests aren't aligned. And obviously, if you have Roy, we can go back to Roy. He's going to want someone who's 24 and up, and has got 20 or 30 Premier League games under the belt. He would have liked the Lerma signing, for example. Lerma's 28. He's South American, obviously, and it's not necessarily that he wouldn't like a Colombian player or something like that. I'm saying he wouldn't like a 19-year-old Colombian who's never played in the Premier League. But Lerma's
why are you reportedly buying then Matheus Franca, who's a 19-year-old Brazilian? Whose signing is that?
I assume that it is one the club are willing to do, because our recruitment has never really looked that way. But Dougie Freeman and Steve Parish, I think, have gone on the record to say that they do want us to recruit more players from those kind of leagues and in that age bracket. They want to buy players under the age of 25. Maybe Botafogo's scouting network in Brazil's helped us there, because we probably don't have any scouts down there, to be honest, given it's Palace. I would imagine it's a compromise one, but he's been linked. Newcastle were in for him before, and they've done well with their recruitment.
Clubs being linked with this.
Chelsea, yeah. I mean, there's a Ballon d'Or clause in there.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, 5 million if he wins Ballon d'Or, but presumably he's got to win that Ballon d'Or wise with Crystal Palace, hasn't he?
I don't think so.
I don't suppose he's going to do that.
Well, he could do. I mean, you never know. Got to dream big.
He's not Football Manager, mate.
Yeah, we just need 7 or 8 more Brazilian teenagers, and we'll be Champions League.
So at least this is an exciting one. This is what I meant when I said at the start. I think if we'd recorded this 3 days ago, it would have been what's going on. Because I think part of the story is, when I said, like, our Palace on pause, like, are you even going to spend? Are you going to do anything here? Are you going to replace Zaha? Now, listen, we can all get giddy about this. He's like, signing 19-year-old Brazilian kid. None of us know at this stage if he's going to be ready to step into Will Zaha's shoes or anything like that. But at least it is a little bit of intent to say, okay, we're on the market. We are involved here, because you looked at it and you thought, standing still, and definitely this squad needs energising. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like the Lerma transfer, but that's sort of fixing last season's problems to an extent.
But then part of the concern was exactly what you'd said to me offline. Is that now like a Decore replacement almost, if Liverpool are interested in him?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they would have known that Liverpool were interested in when they arranged the Lerma transfer, because I think that was because of Fabinho, right? So the Saudi stuff sort of come out of nowhere. Sure. So I don't think he would have been signed as a direct replacement. I think that goes back to sort of Dougie Freeman. When he was our manager, he had a very specific style of play, which couldn't be further from the Juego de Posición stuff that we were talking about there with Vieira. It's literally back 4 that doesn't move, 2 holding midfielders, and then the front 4 do everything in an attacking sense. And so Lerma Decore will be there they'd sit there, stop the opposition playing, and then you give it to attacking players.
We did see towards the end of last season, I don't know if that was fixture related, but it was kind of like a 4-1-4-1, really, with Eze and normally Jeffrey Schlupp playing as really high eights. That's what I meant when I said earlier that I think Eze can play it. And obviously you had Decore as just a kind of one anchor. You see that becoming a double pivot of anchors now, essentially, I take it.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And I think that does suit Eze because in the Sevilla game the other night, he was just floating about everywhere. And last night was, and then Schlupp was on the left, but then Schlupp would sometimes appear in 10 and Eze would be in the left channel. So
I've seen the goal.
yeah, the brilliant goal. Have you seen their goal? The
No, I
Rakitic
haven't.
goal. Their goal's pretty good, but Eze's just like, he's just decided I'm going to score a goal. And that's maybe when we're talking about assets later. Last time we played Sheffield United, the last 2 times Eze scored picking up the ball in his own half and running the entire length of the pitch.
Right. Okay, we're there now. The FPL listeners can join us. Do you think you're going to start with him, mate?
Eze, no, I've only got one in from Palace, which is Ahmada, but I might not keep him because I'm not sure he will start now we've got Franca in.
Let's do him while you're mentioning. I was going to save him back, but Norio Amahada, is that correct pronunciation?
Yeah, so
4.5 midfielder. He's playing right wing quite a bit in pre-season.
Yeah, he has been. Yeah, he played for Stuttgart before he came to us. And I think he played as an 8 and a 3. But yeah, he's playing right wing for Roy, which is what Roy does. Takes players and then just plays. Everyone becomes a wing back, essentially. But I think he makes a lot of good runs off the ball. There's a goal against Crawley. Eze gets the assist, but he makes a really good run. Gets played through, good finish. And last season, he didn't get too many opportunities under Roy. Largely, I think he was actually signed because he has a similar sort of off-the-ball pressing profile to Gallagher. So I think that was more the consideration, that we're not going to get Gallagher, so he can replace him in that sense. But with Roy there, he's been playing on the wing. He's not really a winger. He's not really someone who takes people on one-on-one.
I mean, my understanding of him as profile was central midfield player.
Yeah, box to box, I would say, probably.
And I've seen next to nothing of him because he's only played like a handful of minutes for you, hasn't he?
Yeah,
so I don't think I've actually seen him play. I don't think.
Yeah, well, obviously been watching pre-season. He played against Watford, and that was an intense game because they've got Valerian Ismail as the manager, so it's very kind of physical and intense style of football. And he equipped himself well, I think, in that game. And I think he's looked good. Roy didn't give him a chance, obviously, when he came in because he had to get the results. But I think he did start to play under Vieira. We got him from Stuttgart, and he was there in a relegation battle, but he was still getting goals and assists. Before that, he was at Juventus, so he has got a bit of pedigree. He came through at Juventus Academy. So yeah, he is a good player. 4.5 million, I think. I don't know if he will get the minutes to justify it. It's just because Olise is injured. I think he might start, but I might take him out when we get
that's
close
it. That's I think you nailed it on the head in terms of, obviously he wasn't going to get thrown in at the deep end towards the last year. The manager wanted to go with what he knew and trusted to make sure you got out of trouble. And then that team started playing well, so it wasn't going to particularly change. That makes sense. But now we've got no Olise in the situation because he's out injured for a while. Zaha's left. That's a lot of energy and dribbling ability gone from the team. Yeah. If it's just going to be Ayew and Edouard stuck out wide and Mateta through the middle, that's not a replacement. So it doesn't surprise me he's looking at something different. And if this lad's going to play, then he's interesting at that price. He goes into a group like I was talking with Lee Jackson about this, about Philogene at Villa, Elliot Anderson at Newcastle. One of them's probably going to be quite good.
Yeah, so he didn't play against Sevilla last night, but he played the game against Millonarios and he played the Watford game that I mentioned, the Crawley game. So he has been playing. I don't know if the Franca move changes that, but I don't know how good Franca's English is. So I think there's a chance that he goes with Ahmada just for the, continuing the momentum of having that team. Ayew and Ahmada on the wings as probably Edouard, I would think.
As it stands.
Yeah, and then Lerma, Doucouré. Which, if you've got a 4.5 million midfielder starting against a newly promoted team first game of the season, he is in my team currently. I'm not sure if I'll keep him.
The only thing I'd say is as well, and this will go for most 4.5 million midfielders. You know, we can think about it and debate it to death, but probably the 4.5 million midfielder we end up with, if we end up with one, probably isn't going to start for us anyway. He's just a great substitute. He's the most likely scenario as it stands right now.
You want an under the radar one though, don't you? Because if you get the one that everyone else has got,
I like to pick. I mean, what happens? You know, we'll speak with Dan Ashby next. I think tomorrow. About Marvelous Nakamba, who's gone to Luton. And right now, we look at him, guys. 4.5. He's going to play every week. Great. Get me 2 points off the bench when he plays. But I like to go for one, if I can, that's got an upside.
Yeah.
Jacob Moder at Brighton is a player I'd mentioned previously as an example of someone who I'm looking at the 4.5s and ask myself, who actually could be better than this? Who can get up to 4.8, 4.9? Yeah, like Nakamba's great. He's going to sit there at that value all year, most probably. Whereas if there's someone who breaks out from that, who does like, say, what Pereira did last year, then you got to jump. Now, last year was a bit weird because we had multiple players actually could be considered in around that value. That's not so clear this year. So, yeah, I would want to target one like Amahada or an Elliot Anderson, where I think he could push on and be better, yeah.
Yeah, because I think Olise's injury, they said 3 months when he did it. He did it at the under-21s for France. So I think possibly after the first international break, more likely after the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you're probably looking at missing the first 8 or so, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's difficult to say. Different players are different. It was a grade 3 tear, which is like the worst type, and then he had surgery on it. So, but we had that with Wilf in January, and his was 6 weeks. I don't think he had surgery.
But then he kept getting injured when he come back, so...
That's another reason why I'm sort of glad he's not signed, to be honest, because 200 grand a week for a 4-year contract for a 30-year-old.
Just clarify, you're pleased he's gone.
I'm not pleased he's
gone, but you think it's the right decision, let's say.
It's a emotional decision versus practical decision, really, in terms of being a sort of modern football club. I think everyone would love Wolf to be at the club, but you're not going to get 200 grand a week worth of output from him when he's 34. So,
are you surprised he's gone to Turkey?
I'm surprised he's gone to Turkey. Yeah, when he was linked to Lazio at a certain point, and I was thinking, well, you know, Lazio have a certain ideology, but he. You know, they finished second for their Champions League team now. Italy is a big league, but I don't think they offered him enough money. But Turkey, you do get a lot of money when you play in Turkey.
Yeah. I think he's going to earn well. Don't worry about it, Rory. Honestly, so it'd be fine.
I think he was fine already, to be honest. I think he would have been fine if he stayed. I think he's actually gone there for less money than he would have got at Palace, to be honest. But it's the Champions League football, isn't it? But I am surprised it's Turkey because you know, I'm not sure he would have watched much Turkish football before he signed the contract.
We'll never know, mate. But I think it's the carrot of it's possibly Champions League, isn't it?
Yeah,
he's probably he's the number one selling point. I get that. If he's got an ambition to play in it, I get that.
They've been linked with a few interesting transfers as well. So Galatasaray do look like they're making a move to step up to a team.
The Turkish clubs seem to go through phases of spending money, not having money, spending money. So maybe they come back into a spending money phase. Let's go full circle back to Eze. Why not for you in FPL at the moment then?
Because at 6.5, there's quite a few. I mean, people going for Matoma and they're going for Burmo mostly, aren't they? And Burmo, because of Tony's injury and because Matoma's form since the World Cup, really. Eze looks like he is in really good form. The issue is without Olise on the pitch and without Zaha on the pitch, first of all, it's easier to stop him because he's only one person. Although, to be fair, Sevilla, they won the Europa League, their Champions League team. They didn't do it, and he's just like walked past Ivan Rakitic.
He did kind of have to beat 3 players before he scored. He's not going to be able to do that every game.
Exactly, and if he's feeding Mateta, then he's not going to get many assists, is he? So that's the other side of it. I think also the fixtures are such that you can wait and see because it's obviously Arsenal's second game. We've got another one that's quite tricky in the first 6, haven't we? And then it's really from sort of 7 to 15 where we've got some good games in there.
I kind of mixed bag for you. Like within Arsenal at home 2, Villa away 5. I mean, you've got 3 difficult away games kind of in a row. Villa in 5, United in 7, and Newcastle in 9.
Right.
But that's sandwiched with home games. So the home games 4, 6, and 8 are Wolves, Fulham, and Forest.
Yeah,
it's one good, one bad, one good, one bad. Your home fixtures, by the way, largely after the Arsenal game, pretty much up to you play Liverpool in game week 16. Some nice home fixtures in there. Quite attractive.
And that's why possibly I would say a defensive asset, really, if you're looking at Palace.
For rotation.
Yeah, I think it rotates well with Villa or something like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and defensively at home, Palace, I can't remember exactly what it was, whether it was around a goal a game against last season, I think at home, which if we've got decent fixtures, we'll probably keep a couple of clean sheets in there, I would think. And Roy's back, and we've got Lerma in, so that makes it a lot more solid. And I think aside from the last 10 games, Roy's obviously got a certain history at Palace, and I think we will probably go back to being a bit more solid, because if you're looking over a whole season, that is how you get better results. He came in and was like, I can play with a bit of freedom because this team can do it.
Does the back four pick itself at the moment? Is that obvious, other than maybe right back?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see Klein there, but then we've got a weakness from set pieces, which was even showing itself in some of these friendlies, by the way. So maybe that's an argument against, but Ward obviously gives you a little bit more physical presence in there. And also Lerma does as well. He's quite big. But I think the back four does pick itself, with the caveat that I think Mitchell's got a thigh strain, so I'm not sure if he'll start first game of the season. So it'd be Nathaniel Klein probably. I don't know if yeah, he'll be at left back, and then I don't know if I could tell anyone to get Joel Ward in. So it's Gehi or Anderson.
Which one?
I would say Anderson, because he always looks more threatening from set pieces. Gehi always gets into great positions and misses relatively easy chances. So he might have really high XG, but I'm not sure if he's that good at attacking headers. Whereas Anderson, if he gets in the position, he will probably put it in. And also chance of a long diag assist, really. He did miss a penalty, though, against Sevilla last night. So
he missed, was it penalty shootout afterwards?
Yeah.
Because they're getting people excited that he's on pens now, mate.
He's not.
I'll take it as Eze penalty tag. Yeah, sure. Gay and Anderson is always one, if they're the same price, it always feels like a coin flip. To be honest, it's one of them where it's always felt like it's not worth worrying about. So if you get to a point in the season, if you think, I want a Palace defender, and Gay's 4.3 and Anderson's 4.4, I'm not arguing the toss. I'm just going with a cheaper one. And it would be the same if it was the other way around. That's how it always feels. So
you could get them both in. You might end up with a Tottenham and a Newcastle defender there. So.
Well, kind of follow-up question was going to be, do you think they'll both definitely stay?
I think one of them will stay. I don't think they'll both stay. I think the most likely to go is Anderson, because I think if Gehi gets in the England squad for the next World Cup, not next World Cup, next Euros, if he's in the England team, then his price will go up quite a bit. I don't think he's got a buyout. I think it's one of those, if Anderson stays now, I'd imagine we'll keep him until he's, 30, 32. So if he wants to play Champions League football, it's possibly this window. He could move whenever, but you just get less attractive to the big teams.
They've both been linked with clubs. I know, to be honest, Alistair Gold was very well connected with Tottenham. Said last summer, watch out for Tottenham going for Gay this summer. So
yeah, and I can see that. Yeah, well, if you get an injection of cash in for a certain player, then maybe you will sort out the defense with that money.
Listen, we're recording in advance, so we won't talk about that right now. That's for later this week.
Yeah,
hopefully it'll be sorted by then.
But you tried to sign Anderson before we did. You were in for Romero and Anderson, and then you got Romero. Yeah. So we got Anderson. And you're also, yeah. So I think he's been linked with Newcastle, which if he did go to Newcastle, I can only think he might not start immediately, but that would be to replace Cher longer term.
Well, they need one probably. Si might tell us later in the week, but obviously Cher stayed fit all season. That's probably unusual in itself. So they're going to want one, and there's that caveat of Champions League football to go that. I'm sure he'll end up playing in it at some point, even if he didn't go there as first choice. So which one for you? Gay, Anderson, Josh, yeah?
Yeah, I prefer him mostly because he's just really he's brilliant to watch. When you own him as an asset and you see him playing those long diags to someone, there's a good chance that he could get an assist just straight from doing that. And he also does have the occasional long shot. So if you're watching a Palace match and you have Anderson, that might be half a second of joy before he misses.
Hypothetical example for you here. It's 2 days before the season starts. Newcastle come in for a big bid for Anderson and he wants to go and he doesn't play opening day. Who plays centre-back?
Would be Richards. I would think. Well, to be honest, I think they'd probably start Anderson anyway. The problem for us with the centre-backs, if it came like that, unless we've already got another player lined up and it's ready to go, both of our backup centre-halves, Richards and Tompkins, seem to be quite injury-prone. So you wouldn't be able to sell him and then go, right, well, we've got Jake O'Brien, who's been Now he's 22 years old. He should potentially be challenging for a first team place now. He might leave, by the way. We can't go. We've got a youth academy product there who's capable of competing, because if they're fourth choice centre back, well, both Tompkins and Richards, you couldn't guarantee that they're going to be able to play. And that's a question if you're bringing them in as well. If we did lose Anderson and people like 4.5, is Richards 4 or 4.5?
It's 4. Him and Tompkins are both 4.0. Yeah. Richards is one I keep regularly mentioning and saying, look, he'd hold no interest to me, but in the circumstance like one of the centre backs goes, you've suddenly got a 4.0 starting defender potentially, even if it's short term at the start of the season, for a side who is capable of keeping clean sheets under a manager like Roy Hodgson, who arguably is going to be a little bit more pragmatic. Maybe. We didn't see it at the end of last year, but I think even you're suggesting that's probably going to be the case.
Yeah, and Richards was good when he came in when we had some difficult fixtures. Definitely played the Man United game, should have given away a penalty, but apart from that, he was pretty good. And he played a couple of other games against difficult opposition, and he was good when he played. So I do trust him. Came from Bayern, but I don't think he really played that much for them. He played mostly for Hoffenheim. But I would think that our defence would be as solid with him, but you lose quite a lot when you lose Anderson in terms of passing. So I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable if they started the season with Gehi plus Tompkins and Richards.
But from the FPL perspective, surely you'd be interested.
Yeah, I'd probably bring him in. I would start him. Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't start him, but I'd have him in my 15. But as a Palace fan, I would not necessarily feel that comfortable because also, even though he's only a 4 million player, it's possibly a transfer out because of the injuries that he keeps picking up.
Yeah, but it's also 1 or 2 clean sheets and it's 4.2, 4.3. Move it on to something else when you wildcard, maybe.
Yeah, it could be. Or everyone follows what you say, James, then he gets injured and he goes down in value and you've not got money in the bank. So it could go down to 3.9.
I don't think anyone's steaming into Chris Richards till he actually physically gets returns. I don't think that's one where most people are going to go, oh shit, Anderson's left. Let me go and buy this 4.0 defender. But it's handy to know that Richards would get the nod over Tompkins, though, is essentially what you're saying, you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say. If it was Vieira, it would definitely be Richards. Tompkins is a bit older, but Roy values experience. I would hope it would be Richards, yeah. Okay. 75% Richards, 25% Tompkins.
Okay. Johnston, definitely in goal. Is there any question marks there?
Well, Guaita has been linked with moves away.
Okay.
We're apparently linked with the same goalkeeper for a star at Getafe, David Soria. But yeah, Johnston's nailed on. He's played the only ones he hasn't played, Remy Matheus has played, and he's definitely third choice. So
here's a good example of don't pay too much attention to what's happening with the wider world of FPL at the moment, because Vicente Gator's in more teams than Sam Johnson at the time of recording.
Yeah, well, that's probably casuals who are like, oh, Palace got Roy back, maybe I'll keep a few clean sheets.
That's literally looking at it and going, Gator got 99 points last year, Johnson got 36.
Yeah,
there'll be no more research to that than that.
It was a weird situation last year, actually, because we had Guaita, Johnston, Jack Butland, and Remy Matheus, and
still ended up paying a kid in goal.
Yeah, because Guaita got injured. Johnston was injured long term, and Jack Butland, who would have started for us, went to Man United because they had Dubravka, who got recalled by Newcastle, and because they had those two there, they sent Remy Matheus out on loan, so we played a 19-year-old in goal.
Where was Matheus last year?
Scotland. I think it was at Kilmarnock or St Johnstone.
So I know he's had minutes in the friendlies as well. Is that an option then to go Johnson and Matheus together?
No, because I think we'll bring someone in. If Guaita goes, we'll bring someone in, and they'll be second choice, I would think.
Okay. Mateta. It's 5.0. If we've got a starter there, away to Sheffield United opening day, there's no temptation.
I mean, when you're looking at the fixtures when they come out, you never want to play a newly promoted team first game of the season, especially away from home. So
I agree, it's not a great time.
Yeah, and we lost there. I think everyone remembers the Lundstrom days. We lost their first home game after they got promoted. Lundstrom scored the goal. We lost 1-0. I do not associate Jean-Philippe Mateta with the word temptation at all. So,
do you associate Odson Edouard at 0.5 more with that?
Yeah, I think he'll start, to be honest. I think he'll probably start the season unless we sign another striker. He Mateta played first hour against Watford, and then Edouard came off the bench and scored 2 goals. So Edouard's got the ability. I mean, you saw that in his debut against Spurs. He was like 30 seconds on the pitch and he'd already scored. He's not done anything since.
No,
But,
not really. No.
But equally, I think his link-up play with Eze has been quite good this preseason, which is, because Eze's getting in more central areas than when he was playing as an 8. He was in the sort of, whatever it's called, the half spaces. But now he's getting more into box 14 or whatever. So he's getting into more threading the ball through.
With box 14, zone 14.
Zone 14, is it? He's getting more into that area. So he's linking up with Edouard more, and we're not going to have much creativity from wide areas early on, I don't think, because it will mostly be Eze for the creativity, because Jordan Ayew doesn't scream creativity, and Ahmad is mostly off the ball runs, really.
You know what Jordan Ayew screams, don't you?
Fouls?
Industrial.
Yeah.
You should know that.
Like Jeffrey Schlupp as well.
Shout out to our friend Mig. Can Schlupp or Hughes get enough minutes at 5.0? The thing with Schlupp is, particularly when he plays, he will chip in.
Yeah, he actually started his career as a striker, I think, at Leicester when he was at under 19s, and then came through as a winger, went to a left back, and then Roy turned him into a central midfielder. And it was terrible news, according to Palace fans. And then Vieira came and played him as a central midfielder, and it was a great idea. But I think Hughes has got injured, so it would be Schlupp. I have historically had Schlupp in my team, and it's never been a good idea. So,
could he consider, really out there thinking here, could he consider playing Eze false 9?
I don't think Roy would do that, to be honest. If he did, so what are you suggesting, like sort of Lerma Doucouré, Schlupp, Eze false 9, Ayew, Ahmada, or something like that?
Yeah, or even if you've got Ayew and Edouard either side, you've got the ability to get them off the flanks and running behind, and he can just drop off short, and he'll find it easy to pick up space potentially in that position.
I mean, then you would get Eze in rather than getting Schlupp in, I think.
Definitely agree with that.
Because he'd be OOP up front with pens and free kicks, and probably corners while Olise is out. But I don't think Roy will have that sort of degree of, I don't know, experimental, maybe the last game of the season when we're safe or something.
Luke Plange, he's probably the most famous person in FPL that I've never seen play football, because he's definitely always in someone's drafts. I feel like every pre-season for a very long time. Are we ever going to see him?
He played pre-season last time. He looks physically like he couldn't be a lone striker in the Prem, so I don't think he'll play. But you're forgetting about the other one we have, who's the most famous FPL player, because he's always featuring on team news as injured, is Nathan Ferguson.
I mean, not priced up, right? Which I understand. Nathan Ferguson is of legend. Nathan Ferguson played, I think, 12 minutes for Palace in about 3 years, and I saw it at White Hart Lane.
Did you?
That was the game we thought was going to be postponed because of COVID, and then wasn't.
Oh, right. God.
But he's had a horrendous run of injuries.
The one where Lucas Moura decided he was Christian Benteke, that one. I think.
No, Lucas Moura decided he was Champions League semi-final. Lucas Moura, mate.
Yeah, well, he always was against us, to be fair. He was always good against us. It's probably why we were linked with him. But
is Ferguson still at the club, or?
Yeah, he signed a new 1-year extension. He's someone I think they feel quite badly about what happened to him, to be honest, because he played for West Brom, was coming through.
West Brom fans were not happy when he moved.
No, he had 6 months left on his contract, and we were supposed to buy him. He did his medical. They found an underlying condition, got surgery, and he's never really come back. So I think they will keep him at the club because they feel quite bad about what's happened to him, essentially. But Ferguson, I actually saw him in the COVID ITK days. I saw him play against Portsmouth in a behind closed doors friendly, and he was incredible. He's a left centre half, which isn't even his position. It was brilliant. But I
mean, fair game to the club for signing him back up. They must also have some belief in him.
Yeah, he is a good player. I don't think he'll ever make it to the level he could have made it to as a Premier League player. I think he'll be a Championship League One player just because he's missed so many years' experience. But yeah, it's a shame.
All right, a couple more kids I'd like to ask you about before we finish up. It's quite a big deal made when Malcolm Ebe Eze joined you last summer from Derby. It's another name people might not be that familiar with. is he not likely to get a look in? Because you'd almost think like with Zaha gone and Olise injured, it might have opened the door for someone like that.
Well, yeah, it'd be him or Jezza and Raksaki,
Which
right?
is
So,
the other one I wanted to ask you about.
but they both went out on loan last season. Raksaki was at Charlton, and he's got double figures for goals and a couple of assists as well, and he looked really good. Like all the goals were similar to the Eze one last night against Sevilla. Ebe Eze went to Hull, and I remember reading quotes from Liam Rossignol saying he wasn't ready basically, or his application wasn't there. When he went there, he was injured, and he never really got back up to it, and that was in January. So second half of the season, he was on loan there. He's someone who should be able to make it in the Premier League because of his physicality. And we haven't actually spoken about Franca yet, but that's another thing with him. His physicality is like 6'2" and quite broad, so I don't worry about him transitioning so much. Whereas Jezerin's a little bit lighter, so maybe there's an issue there. But Ebe Eze hasn't played pre-season at all, whereas Raksaki has. I think they'll both go on loan to a Championship club if we'll bring in a winger, and they'll both go on loan.
What price would you saying it's Franca? I'm going with Franca till someone tells me different.
It is Franca, yeah, because it's got the cedilla on the C, which
look at you. Who invited you to be a correspondent?
Yeah.
Franca, what price would Franca have to be for you to go, if he rocks in at 5 million, do you think, I want a bit of that?
I will, yeah, probably, yeah. I mean, it's not every day we get a Brazilian wonder kid in, so yeah, I probably would at 5.
Want a punt?
I think if he was 6 or above, I probably wouldn't, because I don't know how many minutes we'll get.
Do you think there's any chance he'd go in from the off?
I'm not sure, because when we were talking earlier, you seemed to assume he was a sort of Zaha replacement. I personally think we'll sign another winger, and he's actually more central. I've heard it's more of an 8.
I've read 10, 8, wide, false 9, the lot. So I don't know what he is. But I know what happens if I go on YouTube.
Yeah,
it will look like Pele.
He is Pele. He's the next Pele.
Duly noted, mate. Where do you think you'll finish this season, mate?
12th. Unless Chelsea decide otherwise, we'll be permanently 12th.
Are you insinuating if Chelsea have a worse season or if they buy your players?
Last season, we were stuck 12th, no matter how many games we lost, until Chelsea decided to finish below us.
To lose more.
Yeah, and then we finished 11th. But yeah, we're always 12th. We will be 12th this season and for eternity.
I think you might have a little bit of a dip, which is subject to a few performers. I think Burnley might end up doing quite well. When I say a little dip, I don't worry about you at all. But I think there's enough there with Zaha going. That Olise injury means it could be a difficult start for you. That I might have you sort of roundabouts 14th this year. But I think that's also a worst case scenario, I think, for Crystal Palace.
But also supporting a club like Palace, I know the bottom half of the table where you finish doesn't necessarily reflect how you've played. So
yeah, I agree with that.
Often teams who finish 14th, 15th, 16th, they're actually safe in February. Whereas
it doesn't matter.
If we were sort of struggling with 5 games to go, we'd be more likely to finish higher up. Almost because we've got to win those games against teams that don't have anything to play for. So.
And that also leads into the thinking a little bit, because I imagine this time next year, there's every chance someone else will be in the manager's dugout. And therefore, if you're safe going towards the end of that season, are you that bothered? Is the motivation going to be there at the back end of next season, unless you're inside the top 10 or in a worse position?
You mean for Roy? I think, he's known as someone who the players really like. I think they would put in the effort. I don't know who we've got last game of the season. I don't know how difficult the run is. But if we're playing against loads of teams that have to win games and we're safe, yeah, maybe. Because a few of them will probably move on next summer, I think. So they might have an eye on that.
You've got City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Villa, all in the last 7.
Easy.
Interesting. On that note as well, I mean, to counter, you actually don't play Liverpool, City or Chelsea in the first 15.
Yeah, December's rough for us, I think.
Yeah, but I think, particularly for rotators, exactly what you said, then there's something to be had there. There's good home fixtures for a while. I think Villa's the best one, although as we found out with Lee, picking the best Villa 4.5 is not going to be easy. At least with Gay and Anderson, we know they're going to start if they stay. That doesn't feel the case so much with Villa players. Just one final question. Who would be your 6.5 then, if not Eze? Is it the Brighton player?
I haven't actually got a 6.5 in my team. So I've got
that's okay, you're forgiven.
2 drafts I'm playing with. But I've gone for Wissa over Burmo, but I did that before it was cool.
Wow. Segue. Next up on Correspondent Week is Tom Med. We're talking about Brentford. Did you know that?
No. Why?
It's brilliant, mate. You can come again. Where can everyone follow you on Bird app, Rory, or Wit? What do you want to plug?
Yeah. On X or whatever it is now. It's at _P_MD.
Good stuff, mate. And Rory's going to be part of our first clash of the correspondents this season with Adam Pritchard ahead of the game week 2 encounter, the big South London derby, as I like to call it. Rory, great debut. Well done, mate. Brentford up next, everyone. Cue music, please, man, show.